No party disputes this. And count 4, that the willful misconduct of the minor child was the direct and proximate cause of Sydney's death, meaning that Sydney died of the bullet fired from the gun in Jesse's hand. We have proven this to you also. We proved this to you by the testimony from our 3 witnesses. Together they proved by preponderance of the evidence that Jesse Duran committed an act of willful misconduct. You heard from Andy Park, who told you about Jesse's destructive influence on Sydney and about Jesse's obsession with guns. You heard from Dr. Emerson Couples, an accomplished psychologist with years of experience in this very field. Dr. Couples told you that Jesse likely suffers from a behavioral disorder called psychopathy. Psychopathy enables those who suffer it to enact terrible harm upon others without guilt, without remorse, or without the typical moral considerations any of us might have. Psychopathy enables Jesse Duran to lie for years. It allows Jesse to create entire bodies of lie and maintain them in court, under oath. You saw that today when Jesse Duran took to the stand, sat in that chair, and insisted on growing his body of lies, while the only thing that's growing where Sydney Park is the grass above her grave. You also heard from Jules Sebastian, the lead forensic investigator on this case. Jules Sebastian told you about how there were fingerprints of Jesse on the bullet. Jules Sebastian told you that at the time the gun was discharged, the gun was held at the same level as Sydney's head. Jules Sebastian told you that GSR analysis shows that the gun was in Jesse's right hand. GSR analysis, as Jules Sebastian told us, shows that Jesse's right arm was almost fully extended. Meanwhile, the defense's case relies on the story that Jesse caught the gun in both hands and somehow managed to avoid the trigger guard and fire it mid-fumble right into Sydney's temple. Yes, the defense did have quite a story for you today. They brought 3 witnesses. You heard from Terry Chapin, who couldn't believe that any child was so cold and expressionless, and thought it must have been shock. But you did hear why Jesse Duran was so cold and expressionless. From Dr. Couples, who told you that it was because Jesse Duran suffers from psychopathy. Dr. Couples explained everything that Terry Chapin told you about Jesse's behavior that day. Once Jesse Duran realized that someone else had seen the body, had seen him in the same house as the body, Jesse Duran began sobbing, began covering up his story. Jesse Duran did the same thing today on trial. Jesse Duran began sobbing, began trying to convince you that nothing of this was his fault, that it was an accident, and that he would never do such a thing, when the truth is that the only thing he cares about today is his own self-preservation. Lastly, the defense called Ash DeRosa, someone whose testimony is utterly inconsequential because today, under the laws of our state, under Section 10.38, there is no way that a defense can use the actions of the plaintiff, their negligence, even if they were reckless, to try to take away their own liability. Because we are pursuing an intentional tort, and the standard for intent is higher than both negligence and recklessness, Ash DeRosa's testimony is completely inconsequential where it concerns the actions of Andy Park. So unfortunately for Hayden Duran's bank account, this $42,500 witness is not relevant to today's case, and you must not, as responsible jurors, consider it. Andy and Lee Park lost their child on August 18th. While they were rushing home to try to see what had happened, to try to make sure their little girl was okay, this 7-minute phone call was happening, which Terry Chapin testifies to have seen the end of. 9:45 a.m. is when Terry Chapman testifies to have heard the gunshot. This call began at 9:46 a.m. Terry Chapman says that at 9:53 a.m., Jesse hung up the phone. 7 minutes. This phone call lasted 7 minutes and would have ended at 9:53 a.m. Jesse Duran was on the phone with Hayden Duran, making up their story for 7 minutes while just feet away, Sydney Park's body was growing weaker. It is your responsibility today to find Hayden Duran liable for the intentional shooting against Sydney Park. Thank you. Do you have a demonstration you need to make?
Oh, yeah.
That's here.
Maisha Ishmael for the defense. May it please the court. Your Honor, opposing counsel, members of the jury. When you look at the facts, you'll see an accident. Today you heard about two 11-year-old children who had gotten a hold of a gun. And unfortunately, one of those children, she lost her life. Now, as a defense today, we sympathize with the Parks. We understand that nothing that is said or done in today's trial will bring her daughter back. But it's very important that as the members of the jury, you separate your emotions from the facts. On August 18, 2011, or 2010, Sydney Park and Jesse Duran were in the Parks' home. Both of the children knew there was a gun in the home, and Sydney Park knew where to find the combination. So we heard today that those two children went together and got the combination out of the drawer. They went together and they opened the safe. Sydney read off the numbers and Jesse punched in the numbers. Together they opened that safe and together they pulled out a gun. We heard there was a box of bullets sitting inside of the safe. Sydney opened the cylinder and Jesse dropped in the bullet. Now together the two children went to the living room and they began playing games. They pointed the gun at objects in the house. Sydney pointed the gun at Jesse. They were playing. But then we heard that Jesse asked to see the gun. And at that point, Sydney tossed it. It hit Jesse Duran's hands, and the shot was fired. Sydney Park lost her life. But the plaintiff wants you to believe that this is a story of a psychopath kid who planned to kill his friend and did so on August 18, 2010. But members of the jury, that's just not true. Because when you look at the facts, you'll see an accident. It wasn't enough for the plaintiffs to come up here and tell you this story about this psychopathic kid. They had to prove it because they had a burden in today's case. Now, this is the burden that the plaintiff told you that they had. But if you look at the complaint, it will look a lot different. The plaintiff had to prove to you that on August 18, 2010, Jesse Duran deliberately picked up that gun, deliberately raised his arm at Sydney Park, and deliberately pulled the trigger. She failed to tell you that. Now, let's talk about who the plaintiff brought before you to prove their burden. Now, first they called before you Officer Sebastian. And he brought before you this gun. This picture of this gun, and said that Jesse Duran deliberately shot Sydney Park on August 18, 2010. Now, this was an 11-year-old child at the time, and Jesse Duran's fingerprints were at points 3 and 4. They couldn't find any fingerprints on the grip. They didn't find any fingerprints on the trigger. They didn't find any fingerprints here. Now, Jesse Duran told you that Sydney Park tossed the gun and Jesse caught it. The evidence agrees with Jesse Duran. The evidence does not support what Mr. Sebastian told you. He told you that Jesse Duran deliberately pulled the trigger, but found no fingerprints. He told you deliberately Jesse was holding the gun with intent. Now ask yourselves, when you're holding the gun, trying to shoot it, where are your hands? Around the barrel and on the trigger. They found Jesse Duran fingerprints on neither one. They also talked about some GSR. Now, GSR is the particles that fall into a person after a gun is discharged. They said they found fingerprints on Jesse Duran's arms, or Jesse Duran's hands, and on his body. Now, if the gun was tossed and Jesse Duran attempted to catch that firearm with his right arm, which they said was fully extended, that would go to help what Jesse Duran said. Jesse was trying to catch the gun. The gun fired, and GSR ended up on Jesse Duran. Now let's talk about who else the plaintiff brought before you. They brought before you Dr. Emerson Couples. Now Dr. Couples came up here and tried to paint Jesse out to be a psychopath. Now first we heard that Dr. Couples didn't even diagnose Jesse until 2 years after the accident. So first of all, there's no way to say that at the time of the accident, Jesse Duran had this issue that Dr. Couples is saying. Secondly, Dr. Couples came up here and told you that Jesse has a disregard for the pain of others. It's not what we heard today, and that's not what you saw today. Jesse Duran didn't come up here and lie because their witnesses' evidence corroborates his story. Jesse Duran came up here and admitted, yes, I played with that gun. Came up here and admitted, yes, I got it out the safe. Came up here and admitted, yes, I put the gun in the trigger, but they want you to believe that he's lying, that he didn't do it on purpose. Now let's talk a little bit more about Dr. Couples, because Dr. Couples interviewed 20 witnesses, and none of them were here today in court. Interviewed 20 witnesses who we have no idea how long they knew Jesse, how much they talked to Jesse, relied on teachers who we don't even know if they knew Jesse that well. Relied on babysitters, we don't know their names, let alone how long they babysat Jesse. Relied on kids who they're asking about a kid that they met at least 2 years before to recount details of this kid's personality. Dr. Couples gave a diagnosis about a person that she never spoke with a day in her life. Never talked to the child's parent, but wants you to believe that this kid magically meets the minimum requirements of psychopathy. But the person whose statement that she did review, the babysitter who babysat Jesse and Sydney all summer, told you that I've never seen Jesse push another student. I've never seen Jesse hit another student. I've never seen Jesse kick anybody. And even when Sydney provoked Jesse and pushed Jesse, Jesse did not retaliate, but they want you to believe that this child has persistent aggression. But we know why Dr. Couples said what she said today. Because Andy Park told Dr. Couples, I want you to help me prove that this Jesse Duran intentionally shot and killed my child. And she paid her $66,000 to do it. Now, we heard from Andy Park today as well. And we know that Andy Park suffered a great loss in today's case. Andy Park told you that on August 18, 2010, 2 11-year-old children were in my home with a gun that was accessible. We heard that the combination to that gun was in a drawer that Sydney had access to. She told you she knew that Sydney had access to that drawer. Now, as long as someone has the combination, they can go to a safe and open it. Exactly what Jesse Duran told you happened today. Now, let's talk about who we brought before you. You heard today from Ash DeRosa. Now, Dr. DeRosa is a gun expert and told you that children in this age group specifically are prone to die from accidents such as this one. She told you the child's age, the child's natural curiosity in guns at that age. The fact that a gun was accessible made this accident more likely to occur. And not a single witness brought evidence before you to say that what Dr. DeRosa said was not true. Not one. Dr. DeRosa told you today that those factors cumulatively make it more likely that an accident like this would occur, an accidental discharge. If you look at the facts, members of the jury, you'll see an accident. Find Hayden Durand not liable for the death of Sydney Park. Thank you. Would you like me to remove this?
No, that's fine. You can do it. May I proceed?
May.
And so the body of lies grows. Unlike what opposing counsel just told you, today on the stand, Jesse Durand said that he caught the gun in both hands. Both hands. Not his right hand. That's not what Jesse's story was. That is, however, what the facts are. The facts achieve, so you have to ask yourself, do you believe the facts found from blood spatter analysis, gunshot residue testing, and Sydney's body? Or do you believe Jesse's body of lies? Thank you. Nothing further. Permission to deconstruct?
Permission granted. Give us a few moments here.
Would you like us to step out while you finish your ballots?
That's okay.
Okay.
We don't feel that pressure.